The war began in whispers. Not with fire raining from the skies, nor with thunderous fleets cutting across the void. No alarms screamed over the cities of Earth. No world leaders stood before podiums to declare resistance. Humanity never even saw them coming. The Xy'rith Dominion preferred it that way. They were not invaders in the traditional sense. They did not descend in waves of destruction to flatten armies or shatter monuments. No, their kind moved like shadows, silent and absolute, striking not at walls or weapons, but at the heart of civilizations themselves. For centuries, they had perfected this method across dozens of worlds: bypass the warriors, bypass the rulers, take the children. On a quiet night, while Earth spun unaware, their vast carrier ships shimmered into orbit. Each was the length of a continent, cloaked in bending light, drifting unseen above the very cities they targeted. Their fleets cast no reflection, made no sound. From orbit, their collectors deployed, spherical drones with mirrored hulls, sliding through the atmosphere like falling stars. When they descended into the suburbs of sleeping towns and the alleyways of restless cities, their presence was no louder than a sigh. They drifted through windows, unlatched doors, or simply folded space around themselves to appear where they pleased. And when the children awoke, it was already too late. A little girl in London stirred from a dream of summer rain to see a silver sphere hovering beside her bed. Before she could cry out, light wrapped around her like a shroud, and she vanished. A boy in Lagos ran barefoot into the street, chasing what he thought was a firefly, until the light engulfed him, and he too was gone. Entire classrooms in Beijing, Santiago, and Nairobi were emptied in seconds, as if an invisible hand had plucked them out of reality. By dawn, thousands were missing. By noon, millions. By the end of the third day, nearly every continent had felt the touch of absence. And yet the world below was deaf and blind. No governments saw the ships above their skies. No satellites detected the fleets. No radars screamed warnings. To Earth, it looked like some unfathomable catastrophe of its own making: mass disappearances, panic, whispers of the rapture or government abductions. But high above, in the humming halls of a Xy'rith carrier, the truth unfolded. Rows upon rows of containment cells stretched for miles within the colossal vessel. Transparent walls sealed the children in clusters of 20 or 30. The air buzzed with the hum of alien machinery, sterilized and recycled until it reeked of cold metal. Xy'rathian guards, tall, insectoid beings with segmented armor that glistened like obsidian, stalked the aisles between the cages. The children huddled together, some crying, some shaking, others staring wide-eyed at the impossible world around them. To the Dominion, this was nothing new. They had caged the young of 100 species. To them, children were the soft clay of civilizations, easily molded into obedient subjects. Fear crippled them fastest. Obedience took root deepest. That was why the Xy'rith always started with the young. Break them early, and the adults would follow. And yet, almost immediately, the Dominion noticed something strange. The humans did not shatter. The youngest clung to one another, whispering comfort in 100 different tongues. Songs, simple lullabies passed down through generations, rose softly within the cells, defying the cold silence. A 6-year-old girl in one cage pressed her hand against the transparent wall, glaring at the guard on the other side with defiance far too large for her tiny frame. The older ones were worse. They were not paralyzed by fear. They were watching. Always watching. Their eyes tracked the guards' movements, memorizing the rhythm of patrols, the moments when the doors hissed open, the gestures that controlled the machinery. They spoke in hushed tones, not of despair, but of plans, half-formed schemes whispered like secrets in the dark. The Xy'rith dismissed it at first. It was posturing, they thought. Survival instincts. Harmless. But then came the first incident. A guard struck a boy for refusing to eat the pale nutrient slurry they forced upon him. The blow echoed through the chamber. The boy crumpled, clutching his side. Normally, in such moments, other captives would shrink back, cowed into silence. That was the pattern the Dominion had come to expect. But not this time. The other children in that cell, barely more than toddlers, did not retreat. They surged forward as one, small fists pounding against the transparent barrier. They screamed in unison, not words, but raw sound, shrill, furious, unyielding. The air vibrated with their defiance, echoing down the long rows of cells until hundreds of voices joined in. The alien who struck the boy froze. His mandibles clicked in unease. Across the hall, more guards stiffened, their antennae twitching. For the first time in centuries of conquest, they hesitated before children. The Dominion's commanders scoffed when the reports came in. Primitive emotion, they said. Unrefined resistance. They ordered discipline increased, punishments harsher. They will break, as all species break. But in the silent hours of the cycle, when the lights dimmed and the guards retreated to their stations, something else stirred in those cages. The children told stories. Stories of heroes who rose from nothing, of ancestors who had faced famine, flood, and war and endured. They recounted tales of parents and siblings, of families waiting for them, of homes worth returning to. And when words were not enough, they drew upon the only thing they had left, their imaginations. With scraps of food paste, with fingernails against the walls, with whispers carried from one cage to another, they built an invisible tapestry of courage. They created games to keep their minds sharp, codes to pass hidden messages, signals that went unnoticed by alien eyes. The Dominion had captured children, yes. But they had also captured something they had no framework to understand, a species whose young were not fragile threads to be unraveled, but sparks waiting to ignite. The Xyrath thought themselves the hunters. But in truth, they had caged a storm. And storms do not stay silent forever. The Xyrath Dominion had ruled for millennia. They had seen defiance before, brief flashes of rebellion in broken species, but such sparks had always been stamped out beneath their iron discipline. The humans, they assumed, would be no different. Children were malleable, vulnerable, and easy to tame. A few strikes, a few weeks of isolation, and they would fall in line. But the Dominion had never encountered children like these. The spark that began with a single blow in the feeding chamber spread with unnerving speed. By the second week, the children no longer huddled in fear when guards approached. They stood. Dozens of small eyes followed every alien that passed, unblinking, unafraid. Their silence was worse than their cries. The guards began to feel it first, a creeping unease. One Xyrath patrol leader found himself walking faster down the rows, his antennae twitching though no threat was near. Another caught herself glancing over her shoulder, as though hunted by something unseen. Even the high commanders, reviewing security feeds from orbit, shifted in their seats when they saw those rows of cages filled with unyielding eyes. Still, they pressed harder. More punishments. Longer rations. Harsh displays of dominance meant to break morale. A Xyrath officer even staged executions, vaporizing food portions before the eyes of the starving, laughing in the guttural rasp of his kind. The children did not flinch. Instead, they adapted. A boy of 12, wiry and sharp-eyed, began scratching shapes into the floor of his cell. His cage mates gathered around him, shielding the markings from patrolling guards. Soon, the symbols spread, codes and maps passed from cell to cell, disguised as childish doodles. The guards never realized that the humans were building a language of resistance right under their noses. Elsewhere, the youngest among them devised signals, claps, hums, and coughs, that seemed like random noises, but carried messages from one cage to another. Within days, entire rows of cells could communicate without words. The alien observers, deaf to the nuances of human rhythm, never understood. And then came the first act of defiance that could not be ignored. In the hydroponic chamber, where nutrient paste was harvested and recycled, a group of children managed to slip a shard of broken metal from a maintenance panel. Passing it between cages, they sharpened it against the transparent wall until it gleamed. When a guard reached inside to remove a defiant boy for punishment, the shard flashed, and the alien's hand drew back, leaking dark ichor. The carrier echoed with his scream. The strike had not killed him. But it had drawn blood, something no inferior species child had ever dared. And the others saw. Every cage, every child, witnessed the moment a towering conqueror recoiled in pain from the strike of a single human boy. The children roared. Hundreds of voices cried out in triumph, fists pounding against their barriers in thunderous unison. The Xy'rith scrambled to restore control. Alarms blared. Reinforcements stormed the chamber. But the damage was done, not to the humans, but to the Dominion itself. The illusion of dominance had cracked. For the first time in living memory, an enslaved species had drawn blood before breaking. The commanders convened in the upper halls of the carrier. Their mandibles clicked in agitation as they reviewed the feeds. "They are unstable," one hissed. "Fearless to the point of madness." "Madness," another snapped. "It is no madness. It is infection. They infect one another with their defiance. If not contained, it will spread." "They are children," scoffed the overseer, his chiton plated in ceremonial silver. "This is noise. Nothing more." But even he could not ignore the truth in the recordings, the way the humans rallied together, the way pain seemed to forge them rather than weaken them. For the Xy'rith, individuality was survival. Their young learned to obey or perish. Fear was discipline, isolation was control. But the humans? They drew power from one another. They did not crumble when starved or beaten, they united. And unity, to the Dominion, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The overseer ordered harsher measures. Electroshock prods. Sleep deprivation. Forced silence. But the harder they pressed, the stronger the resistance grew. The children adapted in ways the Xy'rith could not predict. They learned to move without sound, to communicate without words, to feign obedience while plotting in secret. When punished, they endured. When separated, they carried the fire within them, spreading it like embers to any they touched. Some guards began refusing assignments to the human blocks. Others whispered, quietly, when no overseer listened, that the young carried something unnatural within them. And then, the dreams began. It was subtle at first. A guard awoke trembling, his antennae quivering from nightmares he could not explain, visions of fire, of screams, of shadows moving through the halls. Another spoke of hearing voices in the dark, whispers in a language he had never known yet somehow understood, "You cannot break us." The Dominion dismissed it as fatigue. But the whispers spread. Dreams turned to visions. Guards swore they saw figures in the corner of their eyes, small silhouettes slipping through the shadows, watching. Always watching. One commander, furious at the decline in discipline, entered the chamber himself to reassert control. He strode into the rows of cages, towering above the children, his weapon humming with lethal power. He bellowed a threat in the guttural tongue of his species, promising pain beyond measure if they did not submit. The children did not cower. They rose to their feet, row by row, cell by cell. Small fists clenched. Small jaws set. 1,000 eyes burned with silent defiance. And then, without a word, without a signal, they began to stamp their feet. Once. Twice. A rhythm. The sound thundered through the chamber, shaking the walls, rattling the cages. Boom. 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 Like a war drum rising from the hearts of the young. The commander froze. His weapon trembled in his hand. For the first time in his long, brutal career, he felt something alien to him. Not fear of death, he had faced warriors before. Not fear of pain, he had endured it countless times. This was different. This was the fear of something that could not be killed. When the children roared together, the sound was no longer the cry of captives. It was the birth of an army. And deep in the overseer's chamber, watching through cold alien eyes, he whispered words that should never have been spoken. "My God, what have we unleashed?" The overseer's words were meant as a warning to his subordinates. Instead, they became a prophecy. The storm the Dominion had caged was breaking loose. What began as whispers and rhythms became strategy. The codes the children had built in scratches and hums became plans of war. Their unity sharpened into discipline. The smallest hands, so easily overlooked, learned to slip into maintenance ducts. The older ones, sharp-eyed, watchful, had already memorized patrol routes, security codes, and guard rotations. The Xy'rith had captured children. But what they had failed to realize was that they had captured human children. And human children are taught from the moment they can walk that the world is not gentle. They are taught to fight back when cornered. To improvise when tools are scarce. To protect one another when danger comes. In their arrogance, the Dominion had created the perfect crucible. It began with the system's blackout. In the dead cycle, when the carrier dimmed its lights to simulate night for the crew, a ripple of darkness swept through the containment block. Control panels blinked once, then died. Surveillance feeds cut to static. Doors hissed open with a slow groan as their locks disengaged. The guards scrambled, antennae twitching in alarm. But by the time emergency lights flooded the halls, the children were gone. Or rather, they were everywhere. The youngest darted through ventilation shafts, carrying stolen shards of metal and lengths of cable. The older ones led small groups through maintenance tunnels, guiding them like rivers converging into a flood. A squad of guards cornered a group of 10 near the hydroponic chambers, their weapons raised. The children stood still, unarmed, staring at their captors with calm eyes. When the guards advanced, the floor beneath them groaned, and collapsed. The aliens plunged into the nutrient vats below, thrashing in choking fluid as the children vanished into the shadows. It was no longer rebellion. It was war. The overseer watched in disbelief as the feeds flickered back online, showing chaos across the decks. Guards shouted into comms, their voices edged with panic. "They are everywhere. They are coordinated." "Coordinated?" the overseer snarled. "They are children." But the evidence betrayed him. The humans were moving with precision, striking in ways no species had ever dared. They set ambushes with scraps of machinery, lured guards into traps, jammed weapons with stolen fragments. And the most terrifying part, their courage spread like infection. Every act of defiance fed the others. Each small victory emboldened the next. What began as chaos became a pattern, and what the Xy'rith mistook for random defiance revealed itself as terrifying order. The children were not running. They were hunting. By the fourth cycle, fear consumed the carrier. Guards refused to patrol the darkened sections. Some locked themselves in armories, unwilling to face the whispers echoing through the vents. Others simply vanished, dragged into the shadows by hands too small to be seen, their weapons stolen, their screams cut short. The overseer demanded harsher measures. Flood the chambers with gas. Vent the airlocks if necessary. Break them, or we will lose the ship. But when the gas filled the corridors, the children did not choke. They had already rerouted the vents, flooding the toxin into the guards' own barracks. When airlocks cycled open, it was Dominion corpses that were pulled into the void. The overseer realized too late the truth: the children were not reacting to his moves. They were anticipating them. Humanity's youngest had learned the art of war in days. Then came the night the overseer himself heard the rhythm. Boom. 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 It echoed through the decks, faint at first, then building in power. The war drum of children's feet, stamping in unison. It shook the walls, rattled the overseer's own bones. His command crew froze, mandibles quivering, as the sound swelled into a roar. When the lights flickered, the shadows were alive with movement. Hundreds of small silhouettes filled the hall beyond the chamber doors. Their eyes gleamed in the red emergency glow. Not weeping. Not begging. Not afraid. Hunters. The overseer lifted his weapon, mandibles clicking in denial. You are nothing. You are. The doors burst inward. The children surged like a tide, silent until the first strike fell. Then the silence broke into screams, not of fear, but of fury, of triumph, of a storm unchained. Small hands clawed, pulled, struck with shards and tools. The overseer fired, but every shot was swallowed by the sea of defiance. He fell beneath the tide. His last sight was not of warriors, not of soldiers, but of faces, young, fierce, unyielding. Eyes burning with the same fire that had carried their ancestors through every trial on earth. And then he knew. They had not caged weakness. They had caged the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. They had caged human will. When the Dominion's fleets came to investigate, they found the carrier adrift in silence. No life signs answered their hails. The great vessel floated like a tomb against the stars. But when boarding parties breached its hull, they did not find corpses. They found the walls smeared with markings, symbols scratched into the metal, codes the Xyrath could not read. And they found silence. Silence that pressed in on their antennae, that filled their chests with cold. One by one, the boarding teams vanished. Their comms cut off mid-scream. Their ships never returned. And somewhere, in the vast dark of space, the children moved. No longer captives. No longer prey. They had taken the ship for their own. The story spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Dominion tried to suppress it, but whispers cannot be silenced. Other species, long enslaved, heard the tale of the humans, their children, stolen and caged, who had risen and devoured their captors from within. To the free, it was hope. To the enslaved, it was courage. To the Dominion, it was horror. For the first time in millennia, the conquerors trembled. And the words spoken in dread by the overseer echoed across every council, every throne, every warship in the stars. You caged human children? Do you even realize? My God, the horror you've unleashed?